learning, how we use our small group time, how we use our tutoring time. Again, we're going to talk about those things through our math improvement work, but also hear some of these pieces as well reflected in our literacy work. So we're going to start with literacy, and I'm going to actually welcome a colleague to join us this afternoon. I'd like to introduce to the board and to the public Ms. Heather Bowles, who is our Acting Director of Literacy. Heather has been in the district for many years. We're excited that she has been leading our literacy efforts since October, and she's going to talk to us today about the literacy work and our middle of the year update. So I will turn it to you, Heather.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chief Dabrowski. Good afternoon, commissioners, colleagues, and community members. We can go to the next slide, Casey. So I am excited to be with you all this afternoon and just share some of where we have been and where we are going. So as you can see that after the drops that we experienced during the pandemic, City Schools Kindergarten has actually shown the greatest increase of all of our grades. We feel like that has a lot to do with the fact that we've learned a lot about how students learn to read. And we know that it's easy to get the work done in the early grades than it is to have to go back and make adjustments in the latter grades. So we're definitely encouraged by this news here. Next slide, please. And we also know that particularly in, again, kindergarten, first grade, but also in fifth grade, we've seen an increase in our students who are performing at or above grade level. And those grades are significant because fifth grade, they were a part of our pre-pandemic work around increasing our foundational literacy opportunities for teachers and thus for our students. And our kindergartners and first graders have had the opportunity to benefit from our return from the pandemic. Next slide, please. However, we know that we have significant work to do, particularly in middle school. So we see that 57% of our students are still struggling with foundational skills, indicated by the fact that they are 3+ grade levels below where we would need them to be for their current grade level. If you could continue, please. Hopefully what we will begin to show you through the course of the summertime as well as next school year is that we are highly aware and paying attention to the needs of our students, both foundationally, middle school, and also in high school. So the way that we are going to begin to respond to some of the things that we have seen and are seeing is first through our summer institutes. So we're going to continue our Foundational Literacy Institute, which we began last summer, which concentrated on the science of reading. In addition to that, we are adding the Adolescent Institute, which is going to also have a disciplinary literacy component. In addition to that, we will have an instructional coaching institute for our new coaches. You know that we are expanding coaching across all of our schools, K-8 as well as high school this coming year. So we're excited to deepen the knowledge, not only of our coaches, but also of our teachers. We're going to extend that into our systemic development days, where we really are going to focus on moving from theory to application. So yes, we want to ground all of our teachers in the science of reading and the science of learning, but then we also want to show them how that's directly applicable in our data and how that looks in our particular curriculum opportunities. So that theory goes from thinking about the pillars of literacy, what foundational literacy anchors are, and then again, how that translates into all of our curricular resources. Next slide, please. And the true anchor and lever for improving all of that. So we're going to develop our teachers during the summer. We're going to develop our coaches during the summer. And then we're going to bring that all together during the school year with the implementation of our new expanded coaching model. We know that coaching really will give us that opportunity to align all of our supports as well as all of our teacher work throughout the district. So we are just so encouraged and excited to see that what has happened in kindergarten and in first grade and in fifth grade, we want that to expand to all of our grades. So I thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you all today.
Thank you so much, Heather. All right, so we're going to now turn towards mathematics. I'm going to ask a colleague, Chief Teresa Jones, to also join as we work together to talk through the improvement and goal work that we've been working on here in city schools. So if we can go to the next slide. So the way we're going to sort of unpack this particular part of the presentation is to talk first about the national headlines and certainly the local conversations and how that has helped us look closer at our data and what that means for how we plan for improvement. So let's keep going here. I want to just first show sort of a national and actually state level story about mathematics so that we can really put into context what we've here experienced in city schools with what's happened in the state, with what's happened in our nation. So we can see from these headlines that during the pandemic and during the 3 years of impacted instruction, we have seen a steep decline in mathematics, in achievement and in growth. We know that the scores fell, especially in math, more so than they did in literacy. And so there's been a lot of wonderings about why. There's been some thinking about the level of how mathematics plays out in a virtual space versus needing to be in person. There has been conversations about the ways that mathematical skills develop over time, and that when that timeline is interrupted, or if there are gaps, how that can impact the outcomes for students around important concepts, particularly in our earliest grades. And so when we look at the national context, when we look at our state context, we know that we here in Baltimore City experienced that steep decline as well. We are keenly aware of the work that we must do towards improvement, and we are keenly aware that we are in this work for that improvement and service of students, and that is also something that as a state and as a nation, we are all grappling with. And so it's with that national and state perspective that we began to mobilize and think about this. So if we go to the next slide, let's talk about what we already anticipated. When we saw our students coming back to school and our teachers and our school leaders noticed the learning that had been impacted, the unfinished learning, the learning that had been interrupted, we anticipated that that would be reflected when national assessments came out, when state assessments, and when our own internal diagnostics. And so we knew to have a work group already mobilized to begin working on this area. We worked with national partners, we worked with internal partners to think about how we would really be strategic in our efforts towards improvement. And so again, what you'll see later in this presentation is we've established a renewed vision, mission, goals, and strategies all in service of. But I want to lift up just the level of collaborative thinking that's been part of these local conversations. So again, when we think about who's been on the work group, we've worked, of course, with our math leaders here in the academics office, but we've also worked with our instructional leadership executive directors, our principals, our teachers, the colleagues who work in our schools as academic planning facilitators, our math ACLs. We've worked with the special education office. We certainly know that we've got English learners. What does that mean for math development? So this work group really mobilized around this area to think and look and really problem solve through what would be our improvement strategy. We are also incredibly fortunate to have national partners. We worked with Great Minds, with Zern, with Amplify, Curriculum Associates, Johns Hopkins University, Gates Foundation, leading educators. Again, we talked to many in the field to understand what was happening nationally, what was happening in the state, and certainly what did this mean for what was happening in city schools. And so it's in that space that we've been able to, again, anchor ourselves in data and plan for improvement. And so this next portion, we're going to talk a bit more, and I'm going to, again, lean on my colleague, Teresa Jones, to talk about what the data story has been and how that, again, leads us towards improvement.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Dabrowski, and good afternoon, everyone. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide, please. So to provide some additional context, we thought it would be helpful just to provide a handful of data slides just to help us understand the national, state, and local context. So first, in looking at national data, one of our key reference points was the most recent performance on the National Assessment of Educational Progress that we fondly refer to as NAEP. And what you'll see here noted on the left is the comparison of results for grade 4 math as well as grade 8 math. Those are the two mathematics tested subjects in that administration. And by way of comparison, you'll see 4 lines. There's a national public line, large urban, and then Maryland and city schools. So if you take note of where we were in 2011 versus where we are now, one of the notable differences is that Maryland was outperforming national public in both grades 4 and 8, and now have fallen closer to where that national public line is. So all across the board, you do see pandemic effects for national public, as well as for Maryland. And then for city schools, you'll also note that we had declines in both grades 4 and 8, but we had less of a decline in grade 8 and more of a decline in grade 4. So what does that mean? That means that there are still some persistent gaps between the state and city schools, but most importantly, that the pandemic effect really did hit across the board, and that there were some notable decreases that Maryland is now trying to confront in better understanding what we can do to accelerate student performance in math. Even more interestingly, on the right side, when we take a look at national data, we're also looking at what impacts are playing out across various student groups. So one of the unfortunate realities of this data, it also shows that there's a growing achievement gap between our white students and African American students have actually increased by a statistically significant amount. And what you'll see noted there were the declines that were experienced across the board. So while there were declines across all groups, white students were not impacted to the degree of Hispanic and African American students nationally. Next slide, please. So then when we take a look at how things played out in Maryland, we take a look at the results on the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program. We call that the MCAP. And what this slide does is it gives you a lot of information. So first, let me start with that top right component. So what's in the top right is the comparison of proficiency rates looking across the grade bands of the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program results for grade bands 3 through 8. So these are the tested grades for elementary and middle school students. Maryland's proficiency rate was 22.3%, and city schools was at 7.4%. So clearly, we see those same pandemic effects reflected not only in the NAEP data, but also in the state assessment data. Also of note that you'll see listed towards the bottom is the comparison by individual grades. So you do see that there are different levels of impact as reflected in the performance changes from 2019 to 2022. And in addition to that, when we take a look at that 8th grade math, so again, just remember, we just looked at that when it came to NAEP. When we take a look at 8th grade math, we see that the state was only at 7% proficient on that most recent assessment. So again, it recognizes that there's still a lot of work to be done and that those impacts show up no matter how you look at it across any data set at whatever level that you consider. Next slide, please. So when we take a look at the MCAP data, that is the most recent version of the state assessment data. When we go back in time, we look at the PARCC assessment. So what we have here is the comparison of Maryland's PARCC and MCAP results versus city schools. And one of the things that you'll note is if you look at city schools from 14-15 through to 18-19, we were on an upward trajectory. We were starting to show some real improvement, and we were starting to close the gap that we had previously with the state. Then you see that gap there, which was due to the pandemic, where we did not have the state assessment administered. We then have the spring results, which again are those numbers we just shared, 22.3 and 7.4%. But what you start to see there is that rate of decline. So Maryland's decline was a bit steeper than city schools, but it still shows that we still have some significant work to do in terms of gap closure. Additionally, we want to acknowledge that there have been changes in the state assessment. So we made a reference here to the right where you can actually see what some of those changes are. We want to acknowledge that there could be impacts from those administration changes and assessment design changes that could also be impacting the results that we were seeing here in Maryland. We have much more to learn about that as we get into multiple years of that assessment being administered. But what we wanted to note is that there was a short version of the assessment that was used in early fall of 2021. We don't focus on that particular time period as much because it wasn't really the typical end of the year assessment. it was specifically designed to be used at the beginning of the year in response to the pandemic. So this was one of the ways that Maryland was able to satisfy the federal requirements of having assessment data available to see how students were doing as states and districts were coming out of the pandemic. And so it was administered in the fall. In addition to that, when the quote unquote, the typical spring window administration took place, that administration is shorter than what we had for Park, but it is a different version of the assessment. So this is the first implementation, if you will, of the newly designed Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program assessment. So that's what's reflected in the results that you see here. We also want to note that we are in the administration window currently for spring 2023, and there is actually another change to the assessment, and that is in the way that it is administered. So it is becoming more computer adaptive in this year's administration. So the testing experience will look a little different for students and how the questions are sequenced. They're still grade level standards, but they will sequence differently. So it'll introduce yet another change for students to be mindful of as they are taking the assessment this year. Next slide, please. Are we able to move to the next slide? Want to check, is it just me? Because it seems like the slides are frozen. Can other people hear me?
No, it looks like the slide. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Let's see. Looks like we're trying. Let's see if we can try it again.
Okay.
Apologies, everyone. I just got completely kicked off. I'm resharing my screen. Pardon me, Chief Jones.
Not a problem.
So sorry.
No, we appreciate having you to help us with the slides. Okay, can we move to the next slide? See if that'll work. Excellent, thank you, appreciate it. And so this slide gives the results for the Algebra 1 assessment in mathematics. So again, if you take a look by way of comparison, you'll see that the results in this most recent administration are pretty much at historic lows for what we have experienced here in Maryland with our Algebra 1 assessment, and just noting the amount of work to be done to have some improvements in that particular area. So, of course, we are going to talk quite a bit about math improvement today. And so one of the things that we also wanted to share with you is some of our local data when it comes to how we're comparing as we take a look at our diagnostic. So let's take a look at that as our next slide. So for purposes of helping students see their own progression over the course of the year and the district's understanding around how well we're tracking towards improvement on our state assessment, we also have the iReady assessment data available to us. So here you'll see the data combined for students in grades kindergarten through 8. And we have a number of comparisons here. So sort of the key takeaway of this slide is when you take a look at how Baltimore City is doing compared to other urban districts, our performance is pretty similar in this middle of year time period. However, there's still a notable difference in how urban districts are performing and what the national performance is. So by way of orientation, I'll make this brief so we can move to the improvement information. But you have first and foremost on the far right, that is our Baltimore City performance. You'll see it's about 31,000 or so students. The green bars represent student performance where students are early on grade or mid or above grade level. So I really want to direct your eyes towards the green. So those two green bands combined are really what we're looking at. Next to that is the Urban Assessment Collaborative. That is a group of other urban districts that share more similar student characteristics to Baltimore City. So it gives us sort of a like peer group comparison. So that's where I'm deriving that statement about our more similar performance. In addition to that, we have a broader set of urban districts, large urbans that are represented by the Council of Great City Schools, and that's that third bar. So what you'll see there is another comparison, and all of those are based on performance of this most recent 22-23 year. Similarly, we have the national year to date, also same time period, but you'll see even more green there. And then to the far right, that is the one bar that you'll see that is not from this most recent administration. That is the pre-pandemic comparison. So what you'll see there is no matter how you look at it, no one's quite back to where they were prior to the pandemic, even though we are seeing different rates of improvement towards getting students back on track across these different groups of the school systems. So with that, I am going to turn it over to my colleagues in academics to talk about the math goals. So back to you, Dr. Dabrowski.
Thank you so much, Chief Jones. Appreciate that. So as Teresa and I and others on the team really looked at data, we then needed to think through where and how will we start to show improvement and what will be the goals that help us focus. So what we're bringing forward now are the goals that we will use in academics and schools across the district to focus our work. And again, we will be bringing these forward to the board as they consider their goals, and certainly are excited to be able to put these forward today. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to talk first about our first goal. Oh, I apologize. Let me start by saying part of what the team did was really decided to use this as an opportunity to go back and ground ourselves in mission and vision. And so again, we lift these up as a way of framing how we go about and organize for our work. So what I want for folks to see on this particular slide, when we think about our mission, we know that in city schools, we have high quality instructional materials in mathematics, and that has to be coupled with meaningful professional learning opportunities. So pairing these things together, which we know then will lead to that strong educational outcome for students, both educational growth and achievement. So when we think about equipping our teachers with these tools for outcomes in math, for growth and achievement, we're thinking about that quality, and we're thinking about how we make sure our teachers are skillful in how they use them. Those things go together. So that's really something we want to lift up. On the next slide, we're going to talk about our vision. So what we believe and what we want and what we believe will happen for all of our students is that they will become proficient and persistent mathematical thinkers. We are thinking about meeting and exceeding grade level expectations. Again, highlighting that we want them to be taught by skillful teachers who have high expectations. We want to support and prepare and inspire our teachers so that mathematics feels meaningful and joyful for our young people. This is an ambitious vision statement. I'm excited by it, and I think it gives the right message for how we will work towards improvement. All right, now we're going to move into goals. So the first one here that I want to call out in the blue band is just very straightforward. We want more of our students meeting and exceeding grade level expectations in mathematics. So we have to hold ourselves accountable for how we're going to get to that goal. So what we are saying is that by 26-27 school year, we're going to address that on our MCAP. And you're going to see that in the first two bullet points. We're going to, first of all, move the number of students who are currently in that space of proficient or distinguished. So when we think about the new MCAP, there are 4 categories, and the highest are proficient and distinguished. Right now, we have 7% of our scholars falling into that category. That is nowhere near where we need to be, and we are going to push that for 25%. Now, I know that that number might feel modest, but we need to think about, as Teresa Jones was lovely in being able to walk us through where we've been historically. This is ambitious for us to double down and hit this mark, and we will go forwards in that space and monitor our annual progress towards that goal. We will use our curriculum, which is the Eureka Math program, I'll talk about that in a moment, to be checking that progress 4 times a year. The second bullet point talks about the other space, which is too many of our students right now fall into the beginning category, that beginning learner category on MCAP. We want to decrease that number. We want more of our students moving out of that category. So right now we've got about 58% of our learners there. We need that number to be much smaller. So you'll see, again, we have said we're going to make that 25%. So we are, again, moving in 2 directions: more students in proficient and distinguished, and fewer students in beginning. The last bullet point, though, also talks about our commitment, again, thinking about our Algebra 1 and how do we help make sure that our Algebra 1, especially those who are in the pre-AP Algebra 1, how we're getting more of those students at proficient or above. Again, this is a new area for us as we've expanded our AP and pre-AP offerings. So we'll get some baseline data this year that'll help us inform our work going forward. So that's the first one. Let's talk about the next goal. We know that if we get more students meeting and exceeding on grade level in those earlier grades, that we will have more students prepared to take advanced courses in high school. That is an important goal for us. This journey of mathematics doesn't end at 8th grade or 9th grade. We want to see our students through to become mathematical thinkers all the way through high school and to grade 12 and beyond. And so when we think about that, what does that mean very specifically over the next 5 years? Well, first of all, we've got to get more kids in 8th grade algebra. So right now we've got about 22%. We need to get that to 30%. We're going to monitor that annually to see that we are continuing to grow and expand that 8th grade opportunity. But we can't just wait for 8th grade to happen and expect that all of our students will be prepared for Algebra 1. We have to have a pipeline. And so that means on that second bullet, there has to be a strategic runway for students to be ready for 8th grade algebra. And that means looking at our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade trajectories, specifically on our 6th grade, on our 7th grade. So how do we make sure that we get more students earlier being able to get at that proficient and distinguished on MCAT? And again, we want to grow that. We will be monitoring that and making sure that, again, that proficiency rises so that we can get more students ready for algebra. The last 3 bullets, again, are a huge shout out to the work that we've been doing here in city schools regarding advanced placement courses. We've done great work to expand, and we've been watching to see as our students sit for those exams, what score they're receiving and how do we want to increase that to hit the national averages. So you'll see here, we want to track our progress on AP Stats and AP Calculus to make sure that we're getting those national score, or getting those end of scores closer to that national average. Similarly to our goal around fewer kids being on a score of 1, we want to make sure that more of our students are beyond a score of 1. So again, we are really making some very clear decisions about what will focus our work and the goals that we will be striving to reach. So then we think about how do we do all of these things. So let's go ahead into the next slide and talk about some of our work around improvement. So in order to reach those ambitious goals, we've decided on 6 areas. These are not areas that we took upon lightly. If you go back to the slide where we talked about really engaging a work group that worked with national, local partners and looked at the research and looked at our data, here's where we've landed. The first one is we've got to have a strong first teach. We need to make sure that in every school and in every classroom, there are schedules in place that support that strong first experience with students experiencing mathematics. And we need to make sure that our content is prioritized, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. We know we have high quality instructional materials. We need to make sure that we have those in every school and every classroom so that our students are being able to access those resources and being able to use those strategically in service of improvement. We've also identified a set of instructional strategies specifically related to math. I'll talk about this more in just a moment. But these strategies are going to help our teachers really know the right ways to support our young people as they're learning mathematics. The next area is about adult capacity. How do we make sure our teachers are prepared, supported, and feeling very confident in their mathematics teaching? So how do we support teachers? How do we support math coaches? How do we support school leaders? All of that is part of our plan for improvement. Strategic recruitment. We know that we need more credentialed, certified mathematics teachers. We are partnering with Human Capital to make sure that this is a priority area for hiring, and also doing an outreach to our local colleges and universities to help create pipelines so that we have more math candidates coming our way. We know that right now we've had shortages. It's not unusual for there to be shortages for math teachers, unfortunately, in the state, in the nation, and certainly here in city schools. So we want to address that very strategically as we think about recruitment for next year. And then certainly family engagement is a core part of our improvement plan. Similar to how we think about literacy, we need to partner with our parents and families in order to make sure that we're surrounding our young people with where and how math is part of our expectations for both their school learning, but their everyday learning. And so how do we partner with our families and community to make sure that we're engaging around math and how we can support math outside of the school? So let's talk more about these a little bit on the next slide here. When we think about Strong First Teach, we have identified very specific aspects of mathematics that land at particular grade levels that have to be prioritized. And when we think about something such as fraction operations, which we know is a critical area of content for our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, how we make sure that when we look at our program and our curriculum, we are prioritizing those lessons. We are prioritizing those units of instruction. That is the way in which we're going to approach our work moving forward, is so that we are putting the most attention on the most important things. Similarly, though, you can see something such as word problems. We know that our young people have to do a lot of thinking when it comes to word problems. You have to be able to read the problem. You have to figure out which kind of mathematical procedure is needed to solve the problem. And then you also have to be proficient to do that mathematical thinking or procedure. So there are multiple pieces that are layered within a word problem. And so that is something that is across all grade levels. And how do we continue to prioritize that in our Strong First Teach? Again, one of the pieces right now that we know we have to get better at is something that we call spiral review. So it's this idea that we come back to important topics in multiple grades. We know that working with our math program, Eureka, that's an area we have to improve on, and we have to embed opportunities to review critical content so that our young people don't forget things when they sit down to take something that they were first introduced in 3rd grade. Well, they got to come back to that again, perhaps later in the year, or even in grade 4 or grade 5. So that, again, I know I'm going a little bit into the weeds here, but this is the level of granular detail that we need to think about as far as a Strong First Teach. If we go to the next slide, please. This is, again, we are able to do this work and we'll be able to do this work because we have high quality instructional materials. We use Eureka Math, we use Imagine Math, we use Zearn, we use iReady. All of these things, again, are highly correlated with the being aligned with standards. They've been vetted by national companies that vet for quality of instruction. So we know we're in good shape with our materials. We will certainly consider other supplemental programs and such as needed, but we are solid in our core. And so again, we are going to make sure we're using those, that our teachers have all the materials that they need to make sure that we can access this quality. So let's talk a little bit about the identified strategies that we're really going to dig into here. So again, when we think about mathematics, we think about how we approach systematic instruction. Mathematical language is something that is, again, how do we make sure we're using the language with our students, making sure that we're using it in those lessons, but even when that comes out in other parts of the day, using the language and being consistent with it. Again, these are opportunities for us to really double down on things that we know are important, but how we use language and teaching that very clear and concise way as almost like a vocabulary lesson. We're going to be really digging into that. When we think about fluency, there is more and more research coming forward about the importance of automaticity, being able to really know how to add, subtract, multiply, divide at a level of speed and accuracy that allows them the access to more conceptual understandings and more advanced word problems. So again, excited about our opportunity to really double down into some of these strategies, which again, I mentioned word problems. Very, very deliberate instruction on how to unpack a word problem. So again, excited by these priorities because we know that these are the pieces that will help our students be able to access that grade level content. So when we think about our Strong First Teach, we know that there will be students who need more. And again, what we know here from the data and what we looked at, both at our national data and all of the research that's been done about the interruption of 3 school years, is that in some cases, we could have students who are 15 to 24 weeks behind. And so what that means is we've got to have a reimagined space about how we use time to ensure we can help students get that learning that has not been, that they haven't gotten yet. And so we think about our personalized learning. We think about our small group time. We think about before school and after school programs. We think about all the exciting summer learning opportunities that are coming our way, again, that are going to be focused on math. We have numerous programs to help with that. And certainly our tutoring work, which we've had just wonderful progress on, and we need to expand our math offerings there. So again, we have that strong first teach, and then we have priority time for intervention when we need it. Let's go to the next slide, please. So I mentioned about this adult capacity. Very excited that one of the things we are coming out with immediately, starting this summer, is an opportunity to increase that adult capacity by hosting summer institutes, which will be 4 days of professional learning in person for our math teachers, anybody who's a math lead or a coach. Again, in service of really digging into the deep mathematical knowledge, both the content knowledge and pedagogical knowledge. How do we teach these things effectively for a 3rd grader, for a 6th grader, for a kindergartner? Again, we're excited about these institutes. We have them at multiple times throughout the summer. Again, really mobilizing our teachers and our leads and coaches so that we are set up to launch this work immediately in the fall. At our May and June Leadership Institutes, we will be digging into this math improvement work. We're excited. Tomorrow and Thursday, we'll be bringing this improvement plan to our school leaders so that they can be thinking about what this will look like in their buildings with their staff. So I couldn't say this better than the quote here. The teachers' jobs are harder, and we need to be intentional about getting them professional development. So we all know, and we're lifting this up on a beautiful day about teachers and to appreciate them, we need to provide them opportunities so that they can do the work that they really truly care about and want to do for our young people. All right, let's keep going. I talked a bit already about how we need to work closely with our human capital colleagues. Again, how we're going to prioritize the hiring of math teachers. Chief Emily Nielsen and I have already been in conversations about partnerships, college and universities that we can partner with to help us build our team of math teachers. We know that that's work we need to do, and we will continue to do it. And then the final piece, as I mentioned, is this space around family engagement. So if we go to the next slide, we think a lot about how do we help our families and think about what resources that can help them, how we make sure there's opportunities in the summer or back to school events to give them previews of the curriculum and helping them know what intervention plans intervention structures are there. Is there a before school program or an after school program? Is there a tutoring program? So matching those programs to make sure families are aware. We have student learning plans. That's a wonderful place for us to be able to talk with our families if we're seeing something of a concern around math, if we're seeing that a student's making great growth. That student learning plan conversation gives that space where we identify any of the goals that a student is working on and what interventions and supports they might need. I'm also very excited. Chief Hike Hubbard and I have been working across offices to develop parent guides. We know that it's important to share that just in parent-friendly language. We have a lot of jargon in education. So where do we use parent-friendly language to talk about how families can support some of those critical math concepts we were just talking about? And certainly we will continue to just work on that space of a year-long engagement around mathematics. We know that right now is a time for all of us in our community to stand up together around mathematics and to think about how we're going to help our students on this journey towards improvement. And so with that, I'm excited to just again, talk about where we're going to go moving forward. We see our school leaders this week to be able to announce this at a high level. In June, we spend 4 days with our school leaders. We will be digging in to this math improvement work aligned towards those goals. Those summer institutes that I just mentioned, excited about that. We will be monitoring our progress. We will be making sure that we're paying attention to both those strong first teach and those intervention opportunities, because we know that, again, this is going to take time. This is the beginning of a multi-year journey towards improvement. I'm going to humbly ask that we come back to the board in early June to give you more updates, because this is work that has to stay on the front, sort of the front area for all of us right now. And again, I'm very excited and pleased by the work that we will have going forward around math. And so with that, I will certainly return back to you, Commissioner McFadden, for any questions and connections.
I think it's a lot of work. I'm not sure if you all can still hear me, but I think that it's a lot of work that you all have been doing, very intentional and thoughtful work. I'm really excited about the math vision statement that you all have put together and that you mentioned. I have a few thoughts, but I want to open it up to my board colleagues for any thoughts, questions, or reflections that they have from the presentation.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for such a thorough presentation. It helps, you know, we have the Baltimore context, we have that narrative in the news, but to understand it in the broader context of both the nation and the state is helpful. But we have to be critically concerned about our young people here. And so I appreciate the plans to accelerate and make sure that we rebound from the pandemic. I just wanted to note, like, some of my specific concerns were addressed, and just give you an opportunity to speak a little bit more about that. One, making sure our special needs students, you know, so often when we cover assessments and things, they may not be included in that data, but that we are planning for their growth in math as well. The other is the availability of different tools, for example, books. Or I saw that you had put that in the presentation, making sure that everyone had access to materials that could be helpful. That was another concern of mine. And then lastly, or two things, I'm really happy to see the parent guides, and just wondering how far those will go up in terms of grade range and span. And lastly, teacher availability. And I'm happy to hear that there'll be a focus on making sure that we recruit teachers that are qualified. I'm equally concerned with the future development, which you've addressed, of our current staff to increase or expand their capacity to teach additional classes. So thank you. Those were all my concerns that were addressed, and just wanted to give you an opportunity if you wanted to touch base or give re-emphasis to any of those.
No, thank you for the opportunity. Let me just say a couple things that I think, so first I want to talk about your question around all of our students being represented, that continuum of learners. We think about our students with disabilities, we think about our English learners, and what are the strategic ways that we think about content and support for those students. And I can say again, as we've mobilized that work group, very intentional around who's at the table and in those conversations for that very reason. So I want to just lift up that is a priority for us. And as we think about our schools that are showing significant areas for improvement, what we see when we look in the data is oftentimes it is our particular subgroups that we see even more areas for improvement. And so we're partnering right now with our Office of Special Education to think about improvements specifically around there. So I wanted to name that. The other piece I want to talk about is that space around teacher availability and supporting them with the summer institutes. We know that sometimes teachers need summertime to sort of just not be working because they work so hard during the year. So we're mindful of that and wanted to offer flexible options. So I wanted to lift up, we've got 3 different weeks that they can opt to take an institute. So if they have a vacation already planned, we wanted to do that. And that if there is not any possible way to come to any of the events in the summer, this is going to be their arc of learning for professional learning for the school year coming forward. So we're trying to, again, really tap in that we want to support our teachers and make sure that we give flexible options for when they can be supported. And so I wanted to lift that up too. The last thing I'll say about the parent guides, it's a new body of work for us. We're excited about it. We're going to try to start it in the elementary grades first, but it's been something that's been something that Chief Highcupboard and I have been partnering on for the last year. And I think we are, again, this just reminds us of how critical that connection is, and it's a very tangible body of work. So I hope to have more updates for you on that one, but that is one that I want you to keep holding us accountable for too. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Slater-Harrington. I think you're a great asset to the Teaching and Learning Committee. Commissioner Kenyatta Bey, did you
Yes.
have any questions, clarifying thoughts?
No, first of all, thank you for such a thorough job. You've covered all the bases, and I like that. One thing that really struck my interest very strongly was your efforts in cross-curricular training. That makes I hate to say it, the theoretical world of math a reality. The students actually pick up much better when they find where it's applicable in other areas, and I see that you have really looked at that, and that really excited me. In that you are reaching out and trying to see how you can embed this in other studies throughout their learning process. And that was pretty much it. I really just, I want to delve deeper into this and it is developing. I see you developing this, and as a whole country is jumping into trying to strengthen this. I hope we maintain a strong communication with other urban areas, and not only urban areas, but because this is not something that just affects the urban populations, but we maintain a good communication there is going to be very powerful in moving all of our students forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Kenyatta Bey. Really appreciate that contribution. I want to, touch on something that Commissioner Slater-Harrington kind of mentioned a few moments ago, and that was, yes, we have this national picture, right? We have what is happening in the state, but we are and that's good context to have, right? But we are responsible for the young people, the students in Baltimore City that have been disenfranchised historically for generations. What we do know, thank you for the information that you all provided. Give me 1 second, please. That was my principal making an announcement overhead. We began making progress in some really significant ways prior to the pandemic, and Chief Jones mentioned that as well. And so what we know is that slow and steady consistency, that wins the race. And so if we continue to, based on what we're hearing now, be consistent in our approaches and our practices, monitoring actively, what is happening, what's working, what's not working, really strengthening instructional programming in the middle grades, which I think will support us as well. But also celebrating our staff. So that's something that I also wanted to make sure we did in this space, because there are some strides that are being made, and we're seeing the impact of those strides in those early grades, in some of our middle grades. And so kudos to our teachers, kudos to our staff, and kudos to folks that are working in central office to, really move the needle forward. But that is an ambitious math goal that we see. And so we want to be able to support staff as well as we can as a board in providing the necessary resources, much of what we do throughout the summer. And we're going to see some of that, I know, in the procurement agenda today, but just moving forward, we've got to look holistically at how we're supporting our young people. I would love to see a little bit more around cross-curricular connections in language arts and in mathematics, because we've got to be able to get our biggest bang, right, for the buck, not just in the math classroom or in the language arts or reading classroom, but how are we making those cross-curricular connections to solidify the learning that we need our young people to have in school. So thank you to the team. Thank you to everyone. This is middle of the year, so I know we'll receive that end of the year data soon, but it's really baseline for us, I know, as we start to develop a track and a pathway forward. So thank you to the team. Thank you to everyone who's contributed today. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
We have, just want to make sure that I have we have the compliance report. So we have 4.01. That is a report only. But we do have 4.02 graduation standards in IHBJ, public charter schools. So do we have folks ready to speak to those particular compliance reports?
So good afternoon, Commissioner McFadden. I'm happy this afternoon to speak to the presentation associated with the compliance report for IKEB. So I'm going to pause and give Casey a chance to assist me in loading that. And while she's doing that, I just want to wish a happy afternoon to all of our commissioners, our staff, and our community members. I am excited to be able to be here this afternoon to speak to how we plan to move forward around graduation. And so, as you all know, IKEB is our policy aligned to our graduation standards. And we really wanted to be able to take the opportunity this afternoon at the Teaching and Learning Committee to provide a presentation that's going to specifically go into more detail on the recommendations that are part of that report. And so what I would like to be able to do this afternoon is provide you with an overview of our high school improvement strategy and how it connects to our graduation goal. And then as I'm walking through that strategy, I want to be able to identify for all of you the components of the strategy that will be part of phase one being school year 23-24. Keep going. So as you know, our system graduation goal is for 76% of our students to graduate by school year 26-27. And in support of that goal, we have really worked to develop an improvement strategy around that goal and in alignment with goal. And so when we think about improvement, we know that essentially that means we want to know where we're going. We want to understand where we are now. And if we are able to make gains from where we are now to where we want to go, we are engaging in improvement work. And so this strategy has been designed to assist us with doing that. And keep going to the next slide, please. So we have taken a thoughtful approach to developing this improvement strategy, and I want to spend just a few moments talking about that approach. So as typical, we do like in city schools to benchmark ourselves against systems that look like us. That's inclusive of the Council of Great City Schools and other consortiums that allow us to benchmark ourselves again with systems that look like us. And so we really began our work in looking at and analyzing a variety of metrics that are related to high school outcomes. And we looked at them across all of our student groups and across our continuum of learners. And so I want to speak to just a few of those, just to orient all of you to some common metrics that we look at when we're looking at high school outcomes. So In addition to the graduation metric, which is the big metric, you can stay back on the previous one for just a moment, Casey, that would be great. I'm just going to walk through our approach. We also looked at metrics that are associated with grade 9. There's a lot of research that is correlated to the importance of grade 9 success, such as grade 9 GPA average, grade 9 core course pass rate, grade 9 Algebra 1 pass rate. We also looked at metrics that are aligned to the way we benchmark against college and career readiness, such as SAT scores, CTE completers, AP participation, AP scores, and then finally, we also looked at attendance. Using those metrics, we then really embarked on a landscape analysis with regards to the other districts that look like us to determine where we could identify common threads that could be associated with some of the gains that were being made in districts that look like us. We also did an internal landscape analysis to identify our programs, our systems, our supports that really are aligned to the intent of increasing our student outcomes. We did a gap analysis between the external landscape and our own landscape, really in order to answer questions such as where are we strong in city schools and where do we have some deficits in city schools. And then we finally held focus groups with a lot of our principals in order to be able to refine and adapt our strategy with input from our key stakeholders. And so with that, we can go to the next slide. And I'll just orient you to the organization of our high school improvement strategy. Can I advance, Casey? Okay, so the strategy is organized into what we call 5 focus areas, and you can see them on the screen. They're aligned to how we define and prepare for success, a body of work around success for our freshmen, for our grade 9 students, high school persistence, enhanced wellness and safety, and organizational structures, both at the central office level and within our high school. Each of these focus areas is then broken down into key initiatives associated with each of the focus areas. And so what I would like to do is walk you through the key initiatives that are associated with each of these focus areas. And as I do that, I am going to highlight those initiatives that are part of phase 1 of our strategy. Again, phase 1 being things that will be implemented during school year 23-24. I do also want to be transparent that for this is a multi-year strategy. And so for some of our key initiatives, we are still in the building phase. And so we are going to continue to build out some of those key initiatives with the support of our stakeholders. So we can go ahead and start with defining success. So we have 2 initiatives that are related to defining and preparing for success. One of them speaks to the development of a portrait of a graduate. And the second initiative speaks to our commitment to providing our high schools and their leaders and their teachers with professional learning that is specifically designed to support the work of high schools. And so next year, you'll see highlighted in gold, in phase 1, we are going to begin the work of really defining a portrait of a graduate. And so for those of you who might not be familiar with that work, really what we plan to do is ensure that our city schools portrait of a graduate defines success through the identification of skills, dispositions, habits of mind, and knowledge that we can commit to all city schools graduates possessing upon graduation. And so this process will give us an opportunity to really engage with a lot of internal and external stakeholders as we build out that portrait. Go ahead to the next slide. As I mentioned, there is a lot of research that is associated with the importance of success in grade 9. And so we have 2 initiatives that are associated with grade 9 success. One of them is a grade 9 house initiative, and the other is on track to graduate by the end of grade 9. Both of these are highlighted in gold because they will be part of our phase 1 of the implementation of this strategy. We are extremely excited to announce that in support of the implementation of our grade 9 houses, which is really a way of organizing all of our grade 9 students to support greater transition from the middle grades into high school, and to support our on track to graduate by the end of grade 9 work. Every single one of our high schools has budgeted for a coordinator of grade 9 on track for school year 23-24. And so this will be a position that is really designed to support high schools and their leaders and their staff around this work. Additionally, it will be supported by a position that we have proposed in our budget centrally, so that we are able to build the capacity of these coordinators at the school level. Move on to the next focus area, which is really around high school persistence. And so we know, obviously, dropout rates are the inverse of graduation rates. And oftentimes the cause around our dropout rates is really related to our students' ability to be able to persist through 4 years of high school. And so we have 3 key initiatives that have really been identified in order to support our students not just being on track, but staying on track and persisting through 4 years of high school. One of them is around post-secondary plans and post-secondary advisors. The second is around ensuring that we have flexible options for our students to be able to acquire the original and the recovered and the accelerated credits that they need. And then finally, there's a great body of research around the importance of providing supports to our first-generation college-going students. Again, highlighted in gold are the initiatives that we will begin going into the next school year, for school year 23-24. So starting with post-secondary advisors. Currently, we have post-secondary advisors in 13 of our high schools. Next year, every one of our high schools will have a post-secondary advisor. This position will support post-secondary advising, whether that be college or career aspirations for our students. And again, we've proposed to have a position centrally that will be able to support this school-based position, specifically around capacity building. We're also going to begin the process of looking at how we are able to provide structures, opportunities, and options to our students for acquiring original credit, recovered credit, and accelerated credit. Beginning next year, one of the ways we are going to be doing that is through a shift in the design of our high school master schedule. You'll see an asterisk next to this initiative because I am going to come back to this after I've gone through all of the 5 focus areas, because I do want to just speak to the shift that will take place around our high school schedule next year. So I'm going to come back to that. Finally, we are going to, in the area of persistence, expand our supports to our first-generation college-going students through the AVID program. And so this year, schools did have an opportunity to ensure that while they were building out their budgets, if they are interested in having the AVID program in their schools, that they could incorporate that into their budget. And then again, we've proposed to be able to support that through our central office organizational structure. Moving on to our next area of focus, which is enhanced wellness and safety. This is an area of our strategic improvement plan that we are really in the process of building out. Our school-based staff and other offices within central office are critical to us getting this right. And so right now, we are really at the foundational level of building out what these key initiatives will look like. But what we know we need to do is think about the way we coordinate wholeness support for our students. We think about wholeness support as physical, mental, and emotional health. We also know that wholeness coordination does align to the work that we do around attendance for our students. So while we are in the process of building out what this might look like, we know that we need coordination around wholeness. We also know that we need to continue to engage our students. We've already started much of that work through the expansion of athletics and the expansion of our extracurricular offerings and opportunities for students. And so we're going to continue to move in that direction with our partners in the Wholeness Office to build out additional opportunities that will engage our students in a way that helps them feel that sense of belonging in their high school. And then finally, there is an infrastructure part of this around safety and security. And so we are working again in cross-functional ways and across offices to build out what that's going to look like for our schools. And then finally, we can move into the fifth focus area. So again, being able to organize ourselves centrally and at the high school level is critical to being able to move work forward. And so I do want to highlight some of the work that we are doing going into next school year in phase one. In our proposed budget, you have all seen that we have centrally looked to reorganize ourselves within academics to be able to have the immediate support to schools that they need in alignment to these focus areas and these key initiatives. Additionally, we know that we need to be able to support our school leaders with organizational structures at the school level. And so I would like to highlight that to support school-based leadership teams with operations in their schools, this year our schools were encouraged to budget positions such as a business manager, a staff associate for attendance, a position tied to providing IT support, a lead tech to support their building operations. We've also looked at how we can organize schools around supports for academics. And so as you're aware, as you may have heard, all of our high schools will have literacy coaches in their buildings next year. We've also encouraged all of our high schools to consider having a math coach as we build out our improvement plan around math that Dr. Dabrowski just shared with you. We know that as we move deeper and deeper into that work, our schools are going to need math coaches similar to the way that they have literacy coaches in order to align the work of their schools to being able to dig deeper into the work at the school level. And so with that, I would like to do a little bit of a transition here. As I mentioned, now that I've gone through each of the 5 focus areas and the key initiatives, I do want to circle back to the focus area of persistence and our initiative around flexibility for credit to talk about our new high school schedule and the shift in our high school schedule model. And so it's always important to begin with our why. And that's where I want to start this afternoon, is really regarding the why of this shift. Through our Maryland Leads grant that we acquired, we've been able to work with a partner that really helped us examine school student schedules from previous years, again, in trying to ascertain what our students were able to engage in from a course perspective and from a credit acquisition perspective. Additionally, we took time to listen to students and staff around some of what they would consider limitations in the model that we are currently implementing. And so there really are 3 critical reasons why we want to make a shift in our model. I want to highlight those areas, one of them being space, one of them being course implementation and the variance in course implementation in our current model. And then third, the way our transiency rate can impact students within our current scheduling model. I want to really highlight what we have learned about space and how our current model does and does not afford space in our students' schedules. So one key area around space is the idea of students having space to be able to access electives and courses of interests. when we look at this, we really wanted to look at opportunities in our schedule and space in our schedule to be able to meet the needs of our continuum of learners. And so that speaks to our students receiving special education services, our students receiving English language services, our gifted students, our twice exceptional students. We wanted to make sure that in order to address the needs of our continuum of learners, in addition to addressing the needs of students around electives and courses of interest, that our model afforded space to be able to do that. We also recognized that in our current model, there is a wide variety of, there was varied, let me say it this way, there was very varied implementation around our courses. And so our students were earning credits in different ways dependent upon the way a course was being implemented within a scheduling model. And that directly ties into the third why we decided to shift in our model. And that is when you have varied course implementation, there can potentially be an unintended consequence to students when they are transferring from school to school within city schools, or for students who transfer into city schools from other LEAs. And so it was important for us to take a look at all of these things and think about the ways they were impacting our students, regardless of our students' post-secondary aspirations, whether those be two-year college aspirations, four-year college aspirations, or career aspirations. And so now I want to spend some time talking a little bit about our new model. I am going to start by saying scheduling is very technical. And so I am going to do my very best this afternoon to try to explain our model in a way that does not get into the technical weeds of master scheduling, because we could be here all evening. And so I'm really going to attempt to do this in a way that will help you understand it without dragging you down into the weeds of the technicalities of a master schedule. And so the shift in our model has a shifting from what is typically an alternating schedule into a hybrid model. And it's hybrid because it's doing two things at the same time. Within 4 classes in a day, some classes will be implemented on an alternating day basis, which means they are a full year course that is offered every other day. And you can see that in this illustration in what I've identified as period 1 and period 2. In this model, a color represents a course, and the number indicates the associated credit that can be awarded for that course. So let's just look at a course that is being offered every other day for a full year. That's that light blue color. You can see in this instance for period 1, a student will have that course for semester 1 and semester 2 every other day. It's paired with another course, the light yellow, that is also awarded 1 credit that is offered for a full year, meaning it's offered semester 1 and semester 2, and it's offered every other day. This is a hybrid schedule because it also affords our students the opportunity to take courses that are offered for a semester as opposed to being offered for a full year. So if you look down to periods 3 and 4, you will see that the dark blue course is being offered every day, but for 1 semester. The following semester is the lighter blue, where again, so 1 semester 1 is over, that student is no longer engaging in that dark blue course. As they move into semester 2, they will have a new course, which is the light blue, that they again will have every day. And you can see that modeled again in the 4th period slot. I do want to use this visual, though, to clear up some misconceptions around what this means in terms of time. We've heard that this new shift in a model could potentially reduce the amount of time that students have in order to engage with coursework. That is not what this model will do. What this model does is it recognizes that we are awarding students the appropriate amount of credit in alignment to course implementation according to what a student needs. And so I am going to give you an example of that that I think is really concrete. So I'm going to use Algebra 1 as an example, and I'm going to use that first period line to illustrate how if a student needs more time, we are ensuring they have more time and that they're getting the associated credit awarded with being engaged in content for additional time. And so with Algebra 1, if a student is enrolled in an Algebra 1 course, I want you to think of in period 1, that blue color being Algebra 1. They're going to have Algebra 1, first semester and second semester, so full year, every other day. But we recognize that some students need more time with content. And so a student can have paired with that Algebra 1 course, a course entitled Approaches to Algebra. And so I want you to think of that yellow box in period 1 as Approaches to Algebra, which will allow students who need more time with Algebra 1 content to have that time. And that course, again, is Approaches to Algebra, would be a full year course that runs every other day. And so a student has more time with Algebra 1 content, and they're being awarded 2 credits as opposed to 1 credit for engaging with that course for a longer period of time. And so again, I hope this illustrates the flexibility our students have in terms of scheduling, but also helps you understand how we're ensuring that we are awarding students the appropriate amount of credit that aligns to the course implementation. And so now I just want to walk through the most critical reason for any change, which is on the next slide, and that is, how will this shift in model impact our students and impact their success? The first way it's going to impact our students is that it's going to ensure that all students in all high schools, in city schools, have an opportunity to earn between 7 and 8 credits a year. Our students need, depending on their cohort, either 21 or 22 credits to graduate. And so in order to build in all of those opportunities aligned to our continuum of learners, it's really important that we have space for students to have an opportunity to earn 7 to 8 credits a year. This shift also affords students who need it the time to recover credits within the school day. We have other options for students to recover credits. This just provides one additional option for them to do so if needed. It supports our students who are English learners who do have separate courses depending on their proficiency level with English, and it allows them to have access to those courses aligned to proficiency level while maintaining the courses that they need in order to meet our 22 credit graduation requirement. For our students who have career aspirations, one of the things we've heard is there aren't always opportunities to engage in work-based learning or internship opportunities. This shift, again, when we talk about space, allows for the space for our students who have post-secondary aspirations tied to moving directly into career, the opportunity to experience and to engage in those work-based learning opportunities or those internship opportunities. For our students who are thinking about 2-year or 4-year opportunities, this provides the space for acceleration opportunities like dual enrollment and like AP coursework. It allows us to fit advisory, which we know is a huge component tied to our wholeness goal and our wholeness work at the high school level. And finally, one of the things that we have heard from our students is, yes, they know they have to take Algebra 1. Yes, they know they have to take English 1 through 4, but they also really want to engage in coursework that interests them. And the way we're able to do that is through electives. And so the shift will, again, impact the space that is in our students' schedules to be able to engage in those courses that really interest them. And so what are our next steps around this shift for our high school schedule? We can go ahead to the next slide. We are continuing our work with our school-based leaders around how you go about implementing this shift. We're also working with a small group of high schools around supporting the phases of technical work that are required around high school scheduling. We will be holding office hours for our teachers to help them understand the model and the benefits of the model, not just for our students, but also benefits for teachers. And finally, we are going to be meeting with our student leaders to help us better understand through their voice the best way to be able to communicate this to students. Because I could try to, and I'm a former scheduler and I understand the technical components, and I could try all day to explain this to my high schooler, and she will look at me and say, yeah, I'm just going to go ask one of my peers what this really means. And so we recognize in all spaces, but particularly in the high school space, the importance of student voice in helping explain this to other students. And so we are excited about this work. And with that, I just want to thank you for your time this afternoon, and I will pause and turn it back over to Commissioner McFadden.
Thank you. Is it Dr. Byers?
It is not.
Okay, I want to be, sure, but thank you, Ms. Byers, for the presentation. I'm going to invite my board colleagues to join me. I have a couple of thoughts. Thank you for the information. Looking at the compliance report, and as it relates to the change in schedule. Now, as a clarifying question, the new scheduling model, as a master scheduler, right? The new scheduling model will be for all high schools.
We do have a few exceptions to that going into the 23-24 school year to give a few of our schools more time in planning. But it's at this point all but 4.
Thank you. And so I juxtapose that question with looking at page 3 and 4 of the compliance report with several of our schools that had a graduation rate between that 73 and 90%, and some slightly higher than that. Does the scheduling model, are we using that data in addition to other data sets? Do they have these schedules at these schools currently?
Some of them have, yes. Some of them are doing portions of what we are doing. Yes.
Okay. And and I hope you get why I'm asking the question.
I do.
Yeah, because if those schools are doing well and are graduating more than the district average, and some even than the state average, we most likely want to use that what they're doing to kind of model and package that in our other high schools as well. So that's why I was asking if this is an extreme shift that may potentially, deter us from meeting the goal, or will it help us? So that's one thing that I have,
Okay.
because I know that there are other commissioners that are on here. You mentioned preparation for school staff. I'm curious to know, I don't necessarily want to know what that's going to look like, but and you just said that you all are going to do it. I'm more curious to know what the response has been from principals as it relates to the shift. because they're ultimately going to have to lead, the work in their schools. And what I've noticed as a school leader, and you've been a school leader, so you certainly know and understand, when there are shifts that happen systemically, change can be challenging for some school staffs, for school communities, for the students. And so we want to make sure, at least I want to make sure that we're doing our best for what we said. Yes, the students and student outcomes, but also the folks that have to lift this work every day for our young people.
Okay, so I want to start with your first question, which was excellent, in that, was there intentionality around ensuring that this would in no way have an unintended consequence for our schools that really have high graduation rates? And yes, there was intentionality around it. Schools with higher graduation rates are able to offer flexibility within their schedule to afford students the opportunities that they need to either accelerate, stay on track, or get back on track. And so if you think about it in those three buckets, that's what schools with high success rates are doing. They're looking at all three of those areas because we have students with all of those needs, right, sitting in one high school. In all of our schools, we're going to need students who sometimes need a combination. They may need to accelerate in one area, but get back on track in another. And so it was really around that mindset of being able to afford the space to be able to address those three areas. In terms of preparation, and I'm sorry, I just wrote down preparation and I need to come back. You had a question about preparation for leaders and how leaders are responding because they have to carry the work in the schoolhouse. So in full transparency, as you said, Commissioner McFadden, change for a lot of people is never a welcomed thing. There are very few people who will stand up and say, yes, I love change, right? This is great. And so initially, our principal's reaction was, wait, what? You want me to do what? What we have found over the course of, I would say, the last 2 months is that our best way to work with our leaders is to be clear about what things are and what things aren't. And to sometimes, do a little bit of myth busting. There's nothing better than clear, transparent communication. Chief Dabrowski always says clear is kind. And that is what we have found has been really important with our principals during this transition. The other type of support we've been able to provide that I think is really the most engaging and the best type of support is one-on-one with either the principal or their master scheduler as they're working through this process, because every one of our schools is unique. And so while, yes, we need some uniformity for our students so that we don't have unintended consequences when they are moving, or we're not providing levels of equity in terms of what they are able to access, we know we have differences across our schools. And all of our schools have unique programming that we want to continue to be able to highlight. And so there is no one way to do that. The way to do it is to really meet one-on-one with schedulers and principals around, talk to us about your unique programming, talk to us about the needs of your student, and let us help you understand how you go about, and you understand this as a master schedule, making those pieces fit so that you're only gaining, you're not losing. And I think I answered your questions, but please tell me if I didn't.
It's you. I mean, you answered them. I just, I want to make sure, to your point, that our schools have the support that they need in shifting. I think I know that's extremely important for any change, whether it is a curriculum shift, whether it's a change in the schedule, whether it's, whatever it is. So that's what I'm hoping comes out of this, and I appreciate meeting with, because there aren't as many high schools, right, as there are at 8 elementary schools and K through 8. So you can be intentional about that time But just the ongoing support, I think, is important as well, as the shift won't just impact this coming year, but it's going to impact, the years to come. So we want to make sure that we're prepped for that. I see Commissioner Kenyatta Bay and Commissioner Slater Harrington. I'm seeing Kenyatta Bay's pin up. I'm assuming that he has a question.
I have a series. As I was going through this. First of all, and as we talk about school leadership and the principals that have to implement this, the input from the real front line, the teachers that have to really be able to interact, what preparations that we have for them. I see you have maybe a couple PDs in there, et cetera. But, something, I've watched schedule changes. And, and the confusion that it causes, not only the students catch on to it much faster than the teachers, actually, often. But I'm saying, how are you prepping out our instructors? Because they're not going to run into the principal's office saying, A day, B day, where am I supposed to be? They're going to come into the classroom and go like, I'm not supposed to be here? So, I mean,
Yeah.
how are we training our teachers?
So I think first I want to acknowledge that there's a couple different prongs to that, Commissioner, in that there's what you spoke to, which is the technical, just like how does this even work? Many of our schools right now are on a 5-period day, as opposed to a 4-period day. Some schools are on a 4-period day. Some schools are offering courses. It's an AB schedule, but some courses are offered every day and some courses are offered on an alternating day basis, right? And so there is that technical piece. And really what we're trying to emphasize right now as we work through what is the process of master scheduling is, how do we ensure that our teachers know and understand what their personal schedules will look like midsummer, as opposed to them finding out at a later date in August. That alone will afford us the opportunity to just help with those technical pieces. But the technical part, and it sounds like you and I have both been through some schedule changes, Commissioner. The technical, where am I going, is only really, that I would say that's the easier part of the shift. The more complicated part of the shift is course implementation and teaching and learning. And so we have intentionally partnered across academics with special education, with teaching and learning, really to think about how in our work with teachers and through our professional learning with teachers, are we touching on the way that this shift actually impacts the implementation of curriculum and the implementation of teaching and learning? Because I think that's the harder work. And so, it's really about that collaboration amongst our folks and academics to touch that part of it. Because in my little area, the technical piece is only one component. It really has to be a collaborative piece around teachers who have to implement the courses.
Okay, well, let's walk down the hall to the counselor's office, because a lot of what you said was in credit attainment.
Yes.
And recognizing that even though we focus on making sure that the train is on the track in the 9th grade, okay, the train really doesn't become effective, fully until the 11th grade, actually, because the colleges and all stop. 11th grade is as far as they can go. They can't wait for the end of the senior year to figure out where you are. Are we building, and one of the students brought up in our last town hall meeting, this ability to have more, I guess, flexibility or opportunity to tap into those things. We still look at this thing like, you're going to college. Yeah, God, and I don't want to go to college, okay? And so it's like, and I know that's nice. But we have artists there, and how do we support them. CTE, CTE is a very big component,
Yes.
and so, I mean, this new schedule, does it facilitate that sort of attainment and without putting it outside the box? Say, oh, this is academics and this is extracurricular. No, it's not.
In the day.
Oh,
In the day. So I love this because you just stated one of the reasons we shifted. If you recall, I talked about space. And one of the things we heard from different stakeholders, right? So, CTE stakeholders who really have to think about if a student embarks on a CTE completer pathway, but maybe they fall off track in another area, right? That's where the issue of space came in. How within the day do we afford them the opportunity to not get derailed on their completer pathway?
Right.
If they have to recover a credit and get back on track. And so what you just stated is the number one reason for the shift was our former model was, I will use the expression, jamming up their schedules.
Okay.
In a way that didn't allow for all of that. And so that was at one point, we had all the things we want our kids to be able to do in high school on a piece of chart paper and said, we got to find something that allows room for all of these things. And that was where we started. Right now, in some of our schools, like if you think about it from a credit standpoint, Commissioner, in some of our schools, some of our student schedules only afford them an opportunity to acquire between 5 and 6 credits in a year.
Right.
That's not space to do art. That's not space to do a work-based learning opportunity, right? And so that was a huge consideration. You mentioned counselors, and I do just want to take this up a level outside of scheduling back to the original compliance report, because it does all tie together. So one of the things that is tied to our high school strategy that is part of the IKEB compliance report is this idea of, we want them all on track at the end of 9th grade, but we need them to persist after 9th grade and stay on track. And counselors are a huge part of the work in doing that, along with post-secondary advisors, because they're able to support students in helping them understand where they are in terms of being on pace to hit those 3 areas of graduation eligibility: credits, student service learning hours, and assessments. And so it's really through, it's not just schedule, that's really through good cohort monitoring that adults in our buildings do to assist our students and their families understand where students may need to get back on track or have opportunities to accelerate or stay on track.
Christina and Commissioner, thank you all for that. I want to make sure, because we have one other compliance report to get through in addition to the procurement agenda. We have a stop at 5:30. I want to make sure that Commissioner Slater-Harrington, did you have anything to raise in this setting? Because we cannot, I just want to make sure. Yeah,
Sure.
and also to our colleagues, we can also send things in if we want some things clarified for us, so that we can move along. But thank you. I don't want to push you off, Christina, but I want to make sure that we get to the other compliance report. And if commissioners have questions about the procurement agenda, which I don't, but they may, we can get to that before we end. So thank you so much.
Absolutely, no worries. Pleasure being with all of you. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Alvarez, we have IHBJ.
Yeah, good afternoon. So I'm Angela Alvarez. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of New Initiatives, and I'm joined by Trevor Roberts on my staff. This is a longer presentation. We're going to just focus on a few key highlights, and we're thankful that we have Siobhan Hall from Bliss joining us, because that's one of the things we are going to highlight when we get there. And so I'm going to turn it over to Trevor to get us started.
Good afternoon. So we are going to be looking at the IHBJ compliance report for charter and operator-led schools. I just want to start out by going over what we mean by other operator-led schools. So we have charters, which are approved pursuant to state law. Charters, as we look at them in this presentation, are split into two categories. We have wholly new charters. Those are charters that were created as new schools through an application process, and that's 24 schools. And we also have conversion charters, which are traditional schools that were converted to charter and still serve their neighborhood zone. But we're also looking at contract schools, which are similar to charter schools, but they have admissions procedures that are tailored to their academic program. We have two of those schools, Bard High School Early College and Elmer A. Henderson. And we also are looking at transformation schools in this presentation, which are secondary schools that have themes and curricular focusing on college, career, or alternative programming. Those are Baltimore Design School and Reach Partnership School. The first thing we want to look at this afternoon is the enrollment of these schools. So as we've seen with the district overall, there has been a falling enrollment. So in 2021-22, the operator-led schools served nearly 17,000 students, 17,360, or sorry, 16,925. But that is down from the 17,360 in 2017-18. At the same time, we're also seeing a drop in demand for these schools. So in 17-18, we saw almost 10,000 applications for seats at these schools, and that has been dropping over the years, though we did see a slight increase in demand in 2021-22. In terms of other operator-led schools, we have seen a slight rise in that same time period, up to nearly 2,000 applications for those 4 schools. Sorry, we're just going to our highlights here, so I'm going to hand it over to Angela.
Yep. The other thing, and so like I said, this is a longer presentation. I do encourage folks to sort of look at, and then there will also be like a written report that is issued to the board at the end of the year. But this gives you some of the summary. The other thing in this short amount of time we wanted to just highlight too, just what's been happening on with MCAP. When we look at the MCAP results for our operator schools, consistent what we see with traditional schools, there's just a few things to note. One, nationally in Baltimore City, state assessment results are usually strongly correlated with household income, regardless of school type. And so when you look later at this presentation, you'll see us share the results along the poverty index for schools to give you a sense of how those schools are performing in comparison to schools of similar poverty. What we noticed with MCAP, which, this is our first year of getting results, 2022, is that those differences mean less in this data set. And so you'll see that students are performing similarly in English language arts and in math across those differences in poverty, where we're seeing in English, the typical learner in Baltimore City, and this holds for charter and other schools, is a developing learner or a level 2 learner as defined by the state assessment. And the typical learner in math is a beginning learner. And a developing learner is a learner who has partial proficiency, but also requires some additional support to get to grade level. A beginning learner is a learner who needs a lot more additional support to get to grade level proficiency. And so when you look at these, you'll see some differences. If we can just go to the next slide, just to orient. We're showing you performance for elementary and middle grades with the horizontal or the x-axis showing performance in English language arts, and the vertical or the y-axis showing performance for math. on those. And so as you look, this is a very zoomed in perspective. Where you see differences, the actual performance is very similar. There's not much difference between a school who's performing at a 1.8 and a 2 or a 1.6. It's basically saying that the typical performance, right, is like I said, a developing learner. So while you'll see differences in this perspective, it's just zoomed in. So that's the main thing we wanted to highlight about the MCAT performance.
One area where we see charters and operator-led schools really doing good work is in the area of attendance and chronic absence. So these operator-led school types do have better attendance and chronic absence numbers than traditional schools overall. And that holds true in all grade bands. We wanted to highlight some good practices that we're seeing at schools. So at all schools, we're seeing a lot of similar practices in terms of data analysis and communications with families and students. We wanted to highlight Elmer Henderson as a school that's doing some really good work in this area. So like we see at other schools, they are doing a deep dive on the data, but they are using that data in some very interesting ways. So for instance, when they have vendors that are doing analysis for them and doing things like mapping out students by their attendance rates, and they are using this data to create relationships between families where the families of students with higher attendance are being leveraged to create relationships with families of students with lower attendance, to not just create walking or carpool buddies, but also to just create an atmosphere where families are encouraging each other to have their students attend daily. They're also doing similar things among their own staff where if they see a teacher that has a particularly low attendance or particularly high attendance rate among their students, they are using those teachers and other staff to encourage high attendance among teachers with homerooms with lower attendance rates, and also partnering with outside organizations and local businesses in the Strive for Under 5 initiative to reward families with high attendance. And just in our abbreviated presentation, we did want to note another school that is having good practices in this area in graduation rate. We wanted to highlight Baltimore Leadership School for Young Women that had a 95% graduation rate in 2021-22. So I do want to invite really quickly Siobhan Hall and Dana Collins to just talk briefly about some of the things they're doing to achieve that rate.
Hey, Trevor, wait, one quick thing before we turn it over to Siobhan. Can you just go back a slide? So this just shows you the trends over time. As you can see, that charter schools tend to have higher grad rates over time than our traditional non-selective schools. There was a decline between 21 and 22, but you can see that trend still holds. We wanted to in particular highlight some of the unique practices that schools do to get that high attendance, but I wanted you to see the trend before we turned it over to, and thank you guys, Siobhan and Principal Collins.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Good evening, commissioners. Angela and Trevor, thank you so much for this opportunity to share. One of our pride points at Bliss, Principal Collins is not able to join us today for two reasons. One, it's her birthday. And two, she is still at school in a meeting with family. So she sends her well wishes, and she's excited that we were asked to speak about our graduation rate. So just really quickly, when we think about our students, we think about them holistically as we are on the road to graduation. So we start speaking about high school graduation as early as sixth grade. We are a 6th through 12th grade school. And most recently, we have begun to admit students in the 9th grade as well. So throughout their time with us, we are always looking ahead at graduation. So graduation for us, it is a family event. And so when we say family, we are investing the family in what does it mean for the family to participate in the student's graduation before they go across the stage. So it looks like we have a dedicated college office. It's called Destination College. And this is in addition to our school counselor and the staff that support our students. And each quarter, we're meeting with families, particularly our 12th graders, to let them know each quarter where you are on track to graduation. And when we're thinking on track to graduation, it's not solely academic. So academics are definitely important, but we think about the service learning component. We are also thinking about how is it that they show up for themselves in terms, we call it whole girl wellness in the district, it's known as student wholeness. We also look at how do we support them after they graduate from high school. So our way to do that is we have invested in a college persistence coach. And that college persistence coach begins to work with our students as early as 11th grade. And the persistence coach, they like to say that we follow them, but yes, we do follow them up to 5 years after graduation to ensure that they have the supports that they need. So that support could range anywhere from we're traveling to see them on campus, supporting them with selecting their schedules, their majors, financial aid, and also with internships as well. So I'm going to stop here because I know that we are on a limited time. Are there any questions that anyone may have for this initiative we have at our school?
And that's also the last thing we're going to share. So, yep, turning it over to the board.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Angel and Trevor, for this opportunity.
No, and thank you for the work that you're doing at Bliss. That 95% is a huge deal. It's exceeding the district and the state average. So, thank you for the work that you all are doing as a team. That's important. Our students, like we mentioned earlier, are only able to do as well as the environments that we put them in and the support that we provide for them into their families. So thank you all for that.
Thank you.
Want to open it up. Thank you. And thank you to Angela and Trevor. Thank you all for your abbreviated version. And I am encouraging commissioners to just go through if we have additional questions or thoughts around the compliance report or the presentation to please send those in to staff so that we can get those answered and shared out with the rest of the board as well. But are there any questions or thoughts immediately for our staff?
I do have one quick question. You had 3 models, your traditionals, and your charter schools, right? You had 3 models with some that dropped in student enrollment and some that rose in student enrollment. Have you noticed trends that support or the reasoning why? That was basically why those drops occurred. I noticed you mentioned them, but I just wanted to know what trends you're seeing.
Yeah, I think for enrollment, I think that is just mirroring. I think charters are decreasing. The district is decreasing. There are less, and I think this will come up in operations committee when the CEF and Ps. I do encourage you guys to look at that presentation comes up. But enrollment in the district has been decreasing. So I think that decrease is consistent with that. That just there are less. We have less student population. There's less families having children, and there are families that are moving out of Baltimore City. And so those things continue to impact our enrollment. And so we see it across different school types, including gear. The thing that held flat, Trevor, you can go to the next slide, was in demand, which is different than enrollment. So demand, we're talking about applications. And so we've also seen a decrease and people applying to charter schools over time. And so that's what that table is showing. For our 4 operator schools that are not charter, so for our contract schools and our transformation schools, their enrollment has gone up slightly during the same time that the demand in other schools have decreased. I think, some of that is a mix of like, there's just less people, so there's less people applying. So some of it is connected, I think, to what we're seeing in enrollment. I think some of the decline, not all of it. So this is just, I think, a true thing in demand because we've seen like our newest charter schools have struggled to meet their caps, which was not something that used to happen in the past. So the last 3 new schools that we opened have had struggled with initial opening, including those that are located in areas where we have overcrowding. And so there is something happening there with demand. I think it's tied largely to we have less people and we still have a lot of school options for less people. I think that's part of what's happening there. One of the things for our other operator school types, what might be helping them is that the 3 of those 4 schools are secondary schools.
Okay.
And so, over the last decade, particularly in the earlier part, we closed a lot of secondary options, right? As a district. And so that may also explain a little bit of why there's a bump in applications for those other operator types, because they're mostly secondary schools. And so with less choices, people are applying, or it helps them with having more people apply.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Slater Harrington, do you have anything?
Not at this time, no.
Thank you. Thank you to the team. I want to make sure that we lend some space for procurement if commissioners have questions about the procurement. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Trevor, around the procurement agenda this afternoon. Good afternoon, Shabray. Good evening, Shabray.
Hello. Good evening, Teaching and Learning Committee. So are there any questions?
So we're not going to take it item by item. I just want to see if any questions about any of the letters that are before the board tonight in preparation for next week's meeting. Did chat with the chair of the Operations Committee, Commissioner Roberts, in regards to 2 of a couple of the procurement items that would normally go to operations, but they're on our agenda. She definitely did not have any questions about those. And so I don't have any questions about any of the letters, but definitely want to give space to commissioners if they do.
Real quick, I'm seeing as I was going over the what is it? Arts Every Day. No, what is it? I'm sorry. Look at my. It's 1-4. Which one that is? That one was
Young audiences.
Young audiences. Thank you. 1-4. I'm seeing a short time interval with almost a 1/3 increase. As I'm also seeing a commonality of using of ESSER funds for a lot of these procurement items that are it's like catching up, and we have some ESSER funds that we're going to use it. I just wanted to get some clarification. So if you can send me that, you don't have to answer that now, but those are the main things that I saw when I was going through the procurement items.
I think Lori Lynn Sutton, good afternoon. I know that Young Audiences does a lot of our summer programming.
Right.
I know that some of that increase is tied to that. Lori, if you wanted to chime in a bit more about Young Audiences, and I think To your point, Commissioner Kenyatta Bay, the ESSER fund explanation should come to you separately. But do you want to speak to the young audiences?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, or actually good evening, commissioners. I'm Lori Lynn Sutton. I'm the Director for Summer and Expanded Learning. With young audiences, I did want to also call out that we are using them as a partner for extended learning this year. So we've expanded our partnership to include 5 sites that began in January, serving over 520 students. But we also partner with, and that's called an ASALA program, after school arts and learning academies. But we also do part with young audiences during summer, and we offer 5 sites during the summer. And I'm really actually excited because we began our enrollment process right when we came back from spring break. And 3 of our sites are actually already at 50% capacity in enrollment for young audiences. Yep. So that I don't know. Hopefully that answers your question. But we did expand the partnership this year for extended learning, and we do have a large partnership with them during the summer as well.
Okay, I was just curious because like first it was a 16,000 expansion, 16 million. Hold on a second. There was a
young audiences. The increase is 10,500,000.
10,500,000 started at 16 and it's going to
27 million.
27 million.
Yeah.
And so, but the first 16 was a period of 3 years, while the second is only a 1-year addition. The 10 million expansion only reflects an add-on for 1 more year, actually, is what I'm seeing. And I hope I'm reading that right. So we'll discuss, we'll just look at that again, but that's what I'm seeing. And that's basically the only question I have.
Shabray, I could be, the extension's actually through 2025, correct, Shabray? So right, June 30th of 2025.
Yeah.
25, okay.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, because I'm seeing 20, I thought it was 2024, but that's okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you.
Yep, and I want to highlight again, right, the expansion of the program as one of our partners. That's important.
Oh yeah, no, I'm a big supporter of them, but I just wanted to look at that detailed expansion. That's all.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kenyatta Bay. Commissioner Slater Harrington.
The only note I had on procurement was really for the COVID expansion of the COVID testing program. Just wanted to make sure it was in alignment. I know there are some new federal guidance that came out with the feds kind of sunsetting like COVID requirements. And this is a notable amount to extend it through June 30th. It will be about $2 million more. So not that I don't want it, but I just wanted to make sure that it's in alignment with what the feds are doing.
Yes, this is Nick Smith. I'm the Director of COVID Response. Yes, it is for most part. Everything up until May 11th will be reimbursable. This is just to take the remainder of the program to the end of the school year, and then the program will sunset. So we still want to provide support, and the amount that we're asking for is just to ensure that we have enough on the books to close out the program, and then we can sunset the program effectively for the end of the school year with it, which is June 13th. So there's probably about maybe a 2-week gap or so that in between May 11th until then. So yeah, what's happening?
Thanks.
1.8. Oh, I should have muted. Sorry.
Are there any additional questions? Thank you to to the team. Are there any additional questions?
No, thank you. I'm satisfied.
Okay. All right.
I'm happy.
Thanks and welcome. Thank you, Shabray, and thank you again, Commissioner Slater Harrington, for joining us today. Happy first teaching and learning meeting.
Thank you.
Yep, it's a pleasure to have you. We've got another couple board commissioners have a 6 o'clock meeting with the student group. Tanisha, Ms. Moore, are you able to just let us know when our next meeting is and the agenda items that will be on that meeting of this committee?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your patience on today. Our next meeting for the Teaching and Learning Committee is scheduled for June 6th, and it will be held beginning at 3:30. The agenda items for that meeting, we will have a R3 presentation, expanded opportunities with a focus on ESOL, dual language, and EL strategy, early learning, and KRA results update, and review of operator renewal process information update. That's it.
Thank you, Tanisha. Thank you to all of our staff again this evening for all of the work that you're doing each and every day for our students, but certainly our teachers on National Teacher Day. Please thank a teacher if you have not already done that. And certainly next week is Teacher Appreciation Week. And today usually coincides with Teacher Appreciation Week, but it seems like we're a little separate this year. But make sure that you do some things to celebrate our teachers next week, your teachers this next week. I saw a hand. Tanisha, did you have your hand up?
Nope, that was a mistake. I just wanted to do a hand clap for our teachers.
Absolutely. So with that, we are going to adjourn this evening. Everyone be safe, have a good night, and we will see you next Tuesday for our full public board meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Commissioners.